Yes, hello everyone, welcome back to NFTV. I hope you're doing a read Friday night, and I'm going to run you through some news, which of course the PIF and the Reuben family have ploughed money back into Newcastle United, over 111.5 million. Anarchy Brewery respond to war beer claims, or Wylam Brewery, shall I say. Team news ahead of this weekend, and of course there could be a new vice captain in the leadership group amongst Newcastle United. And finally, Darren Eales says his goodbyes. Let's get going, everyone. We're going to start with Anarchy Brewery, get you up to speed with the story. So if you didn't know, War Flags, well, you know how War Flags are, but they had a beer called War Beer, which Anarchy Brewery made and donated lots of money to fantastic causes such as War Flags. However, they switched the brewery, not fully sure why, but they're now at Wylam Brewery, and there's been a dispute because Anarchy Brewery don't want Wylam Brewery using the word war trademarked in beer terms. So they have trademarked that, and they have replied saying that they have not made a legal case against Wylam. However, they have trademarked it in the beer world. So now we know a little bit. You can read onto it that they've went out and said that they've donated over 40,000 to War Flags and so on and so on. But I still think it comes across as a bit petty, I do. Because obviously War Flags are fantastic in what they do. And I know a few people who work, or volunteer rather, for War Flags. I still think it's petty that they can't produce war beer because it's part of War Flags. And yes, they might have trademarked it. I get it from a legal point of view, but I still think it's petty, but nice to say it. And do I take back some of my comments of the day? I'll take a few of them back, but not all of them. I'm not going to lie to you. Now, on to something a little different. Craig Hope, I've spotted this in his article today. Newcastle United potentially may have another vice-captain on my hands. Currently, at the moment, we all know that Bruno Guimaraes is the captain, and then after that, it gets shared around between the likes of Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn, and so on. So currently, the leadership group at the moment is Bruno Guimaraes, Dan Burn, Kieran Trippier, Jacob Murphy, and Jamal Lascelles. Now, there is a vote going on amongst the players today, which will be privately. The results will already be known by now, but the front runners are Fabian Schär, Joe Linton, Nick Pope, and Sandro Tonali. So one of those will join the leadership group. So does it make much difference? Look, I think having so many leaders on the pitch helps regardless, I feel. And you can never be shy of having so many leaders. Yes, Bruno might wear the captain's armband, but you see the likes of Kieran Trippier, what he does on the bench, in terms of support and guidance off the pitch as well, and on the pitch as well. So it can go a long way, but for us fans, I don't think it makes too much of a difference. So Darren Eales has finally said goodbye to Newcastle United in a heartfelt message. This is on our social media if you want to read it in full. But he says so many stuff about like when we packed Trafalgar Square and it was nicknamed Newcastle upon Thames, sung our hearts out for the Carabao Cup, the Champions League, queuing to get on a bus at 7 a.m. to go to Sunderland for the derby and the FA Cup. Dan Burns' header, the PSG night, the Tuamua, the parade, the trophy win, and so on. Have a look at it on our socials. Darren Eales has also done a club interview on the YouTube channel, on Newcastle United's official YouTube channel, and he now departs, and he'll still stay in the area. He's having treatment at the Freeman, and he goes on to say in the interview with Dan that he's very much thankful of the club. They're in a good place moving forward. The revenues are up by 24%, which he said it was unheard of in the world of football. And obviously he's thanked everyone at the NHS and fans as well. And I bumped into Darren 3 times, Newcastle, Tokyo, Philadelphia, and technically 4 times in New Jersey when Steve had his top off and going absolute crackers in the stands. But look, his legacy will be that Newcastle have won a trophy, 2 Champions League places, another cup final, revenues are up, and yes, people might say that, you know, the black spot on his regime at his time at Newcastle was the appointment of Paul Mitchell, but if you take that aside, it's absolutely been fantastic. So nothing but praise, and hopefully he gets well, his treatment goes well, and everyone at Newcastle Fans TV, Darren is thinking of you. Again, moving on to another story which you can see on our socials, that the PIF and the Reuben brothers, 106.5 million, easy for me to say, for the men, and 5 million in the women. Now, only Chelsea and Everton have put their owners, and our owners, only Chelsea and Everton have put more money back into the club than anyone else. So we're third in the Premier League list for the amount of money that owners are putting into the club. And the reason being is for day-to-day costs. It's not anything to do with like transfers. It doesn't affect PSR or anything like that. They are allowed to do it. And it's not the first time that the owners have done it. And it's not the second time. I think it's something like the third or fourth time that they've done it since they've been here. It is the highest one-off payment going into the club, which is more or less 111.5 million if you add the women onto that. So obviously the women's is quite small, 5 million. Obviously their scale's totally different to the men. Obviously the men are on mad amounts of day-to-day in terms of how many staff we have. Not just plain staff, I'm talking about just commercial, business, events, you name it. There's, I think even Darren Eales was saying in his interview that has rocketed up in terms of how much staff that I have. But it funds operations. Obviously, it's compliant with PSR, avoids penalties, and also PIF have been questioned by some fans that have they lost interest in it. Well, I haven't, because they're still putting money in, the third highest in the Premier League. They're still putting money in. Yes, you can be critical because they should have had a training ground sponsor by now, and that is being looked at. And obviously, the training ground is being currently built and upgraded. And Eddie Howe was talking about that in his presser as well. So, the training ground, the new training ground complex is probably going to come in time. Obviously, the women now have one themselves. They're moving into a brand new complex, having pitches and gyms and meeting rooms and analyst rooms and so on being built as well. So it's good for them. So there is development. It's just a little bit slower than probably what most fans, including myself, because I would have probably seen a training sponsor by now. And obviously the whole stadium stuff, we're waiting to see if the St. James's Park has been pulled and upgraded, or we're going to have a brand new one. So still waiting on that. But the PIF are still investing in Newcastle United. That's the message. If you want to check what's going on in the world of Newcastle United from the women's, the under-21s and the men, check out Matt's article on newcastlefanstv.com where he has all the latest from the past 7 days. And since he's still watching this video, if you can help us out with a massive like, that does go a long way for me personally, because I get to see the analytics and what you're enjoying and stuff like that. So you can drop us a like while you're watching. It costs you now. That'll be absolutely wonderful. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed. You get all the Toon stuff, yeah? Let's move on to some press conference news that Eddie Howe. We'll begin with the form of Gordon, Valdemade and Asula. So he's basically mentioned that Will Asula last season was development. Could have got his move, of course, on deadline day, but Will Asula wants to play more, and Eddie Howe said, look, he's done well, he's learning his little things in the training, and he scored 2 goals in midweek as well. I do expect him to drop back to the bench, unfortunately. I think Valdemade will start up top against Arsenal. But I think Will Asula wants more game time, and I think if he doesn't, I think he could be off possibly January, even towards the summer. Speaking of Valdemade, he was asked the question by Pete Graves, do you see him as a number 9 or a number 10? And Eddie Howe said that he sees him as a number 9. He plays different to other strikers that he's had. He was referencing Callum Wilson, whereas Valdemade likes to pick up the pocket and play people in, whereas Wilson won again in the 6-yard box. They're going to work with Valdemade to be in that kind of area, that position, because that's ultimately goals are scored by strikers, and strikers are judged by goals. And then a little bit on Anthony Gordon. It was just a boost to have him back. Of course, he was good in midweek. Yes, and to League One opposition, sorry. But it's against the Premier League Arsenal. You want Gordon on that left-hand side. Nowhere else, please. Just on that left-hand side. And now he's back. He's in the thick of things now. He's back available, playing games. And he can focus heavily on the next few games with Anthony Gordon. Moving on to Anthony Elanga has been defended by Eddie Howe, and obviously Craig Hope asked the question that he has 0 goals, 0 assists, and I think Eddie Howe said, look, statistically you're right, however, but if you look at the chances that he's created, especially first half Barcelona, there's been in spells where he has looked good. I think with Anthony Elanga, we are going to get frustrated by him. I think that's a given, but I think you've got to give him time, because if you look at Anthony Gordon, right, Anthony Gordon was in and out of the side when he came in. He was vying with saint-maximin when he first joined. And then he needed 6 months to then kick on. Look how well he did. I think Elanga needs at least until January to see where he's at. And I think at the moment, and obviously Jacob Murphy will come up in the team news in a minute, but I don't think there's one standout right winger. I think they're quite level-ish, maybe just going like that. But he said, look, he's got raw pace. Newcastle will use that. And I think that's also great if we can use that on the counter-attack as well. So he was defending Anthony Elanga. Again, you can read that on the social medias. And then a little bit of team news ahead of Arsenal. Obviously, they're coming up the A1, M1. this weekend. They'll be in Newcastle Saturday. So let's talk about it. So there isn't much on Fabian Schär. Now the Chronicle do say that he'll still miss the game against Arsenal because of his concussion protocol. It has to be an extended time. So it's likely that he's not going to be available. So probably you would say Malik Chow. We are going to jump on the whiteboard tomorrow, so do join us for that. I'm going to do 2 different formations because I don't know if Eddie Howe's going to go 5 at the back with wing backs or 4. But Malik Chow is probably going to come in if it's a 4, and if it's a 5, then obviously Botman stays in. Obviously, Johan Visser will be back after the international break, and of course, Anthony Gordon, as touched upon, has already served his ban. Then he went on and mentioned it, and I'll quote this, and you can see this. We have a couple of players to check today. No major injuries from the game. However, Jacob Murphy is doing okay. It's an issue that we're managing. He is fit and available, but some days he's been sore, so we're just trying to manage his load. So basically, Murphy's got something wrong with his Achilles. And then on Jacob Ramsey, his recovery is going well. He's on the grass working hard and building his fitness back up. I think it'll be after the international break that we see him. Anything before that, then he'll be ahead of schedule. So there you go, and there's your team news. Obviously, as I say, we'll jump on that tomorrow. So, headlines from today's video then. So, PIF have invested 111.5 million back in the club. Darren Eales has said goodbye. We're potentially going to have another player in the leadership group. Anarchy Brewery have responded to war flags. And there's team news ahead of this weekend for you. So you get it all here on Newcastle Fans TV, man. Cool. Right, join us tomorrow for this. Drop us a massive like, and we'll see you soon.